Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Thursday. God, what day is it? Tuesday, February 10th, meeting of the Northampton Energy and Sustainability Committee. We are a hybrid meeting today. I am Carolyn Mish. I'm the vice chair standing in for Ben Weil, who is under the weather and not only present on Zoom. So I'm going to chair the meeting today. And before we start, I just want to do a roll call of the members. I don't know if you do that or if you want me to do that is fine, just because we do have some people in person and some people on Zoom. We're recording, and we will, because we're hybrid, we do roll call on all the votes. So.
Sure, I can do it. Okay. Angie Gregory.
Present.
Ben Weil.
Here.
Chris Stratton.
Here.
Gwen Nabad.
Present.
Louis Hasbrook.
Here.
Carolyn Mish.
Here.
I think we got everybody.
Okay. Great. So we start every meeting with public comment. So for items that are not otherwise on the agenda, if you want to raise your virtual hand in the virtual world, or if there's anybody in person who has a public comment that's not otherwise on the agenda, we can go through those. I'll start in the room first. Anybody out here in the big sphere that has public comment? Okay. Anybody in Zoom land? Okay, I don't see any hands. Great. All right, we will move on to the next item, which is review and approval of the minutes. And Gabi sent those out. So do I have a motion for approval?
I'll do a motion to approve.
Yeah, second?
Second.
Gwen. Okay. So motion by Angie, second by Gwen, and we'll do a roll call vote. Chris?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Gwen?
Yes.
Louis?
Yes.
And Ben?
Yes.
Awesome. And I vote yes as well. So that's unanimous. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a report from the Pollinator Subcommittee update. Angie Gregory, that's you.
Thanks, Carolyn. Yeah, just wanted to update folks that we had a pollinator subcommittee meeting on the 16th where we kind of were meeting with the environmental club student leaders to talk about what the next steps are for them, because we've heard some input from this commission around kind of expanding the impact and just wanting to hear from the group what they kind of had the bandwidth for and interest for. So really just wanted to focus today's updates on next steps, but we'll have these minutes posted after we meet again later this month. But mostly I think the students are really going to focus on just kind of being able to talk more about the project that they were able to complete, really focusing on signage, maybe doing some presentations, and really focusing on maintenance for what they've already established, just because that's an important thing to remember without like across initiatives, and especially for things that have living plants. And then we discussed the idea of maybe talking and like showing examples from other communities and around manuals for residents to be able to kind of create a similar thing in their landscape. And they have another interest in really connecting with other volunteer groups. And Rich was going to provide a connection to Tree Northampton. I think students were really interested, even beyond the members of their club, to engage more students from NHS in efforts that Tree Northampton is already doing. And we understand through that conversation with Rich that it's also really important to maintain the trees that have already been planted and making sure they're getting the right kind of water regimen. Also found out that we are special employees and can drive the water truck, I was like, I will drive the water truck and water stuff. So that was very exciting. And one of the student leaders, who won't be named, was also like, can I drive the water truck? So now we decided that that was not okay. But basically, I think there's going to be some more discussion. We're going to meet February 27th at NHS, because it's also it's harder to connect with the whole group, just purely based on the time that we meet in the location. So we're going to meet at NHS on the 27th at 8 a.m. To allow for more students from that club to participate. And we'll just kind of continue this discussion, not only in how our subcommittee can support that group with either a residence guide and just like maintenance plan, and then some of the other particulars like providing compost and filling their rain barrel so that they have access to water. So that's the update. Are there any questions, concerns, feedback, other ideas to discuss with them? If you think of things, you can let me know. Okay.
I maybe should already know this, but can you just give a brief summary of this little subcommittee, just some mission of it and yeah.
Yeah, so I'm trying to remember what the subcommittee's name was before. Was it just pollinator? Was it pollinator landscape? It had an existence prior to when I joined the commission, and it was kind of latent. And then I think because at the time they had formed it almost like an ad hoc to address a particular endeavor, and then the endeavor happened and kind of just didn't really have a lot of need. And so, yeah, I think it was just the conversations through NESC commission members to have some other ways that we could actively engage and support projects. And what are some of those projects? I think we were learning about the seeding that was going to happen in some of the Smith of Oak land, and there might be extra seeds. And Carolyn had heard of some other projects that were of interest from different groups, and so it was kind of like reaching out to those groups, finding out what they needed support with. And then the NHS Environmental Club was interested in, actually it was the hillside that slopes down to the stadium that has the NHS bushes that they wanted to originally just see as like a pollinator landscape. So the commission's role in that was really just supporting them through like how do you like supporting them through a process to find out how they could get permissions and who to have conversations with, and then what kind of resources the city could provide to support the project as well. So yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I think the other piece was so part of that, there was a seed purchase that the pollinator subcommittee at the time sort of shepherded through with some of the Rex funds that that we had left over, not left over, but to put to use. And so that was that was purchased for Smith Folk and for the planting project on one of the Smith Folk properties. And so then I think that led to sort of, then there was this latent period because that actually, even though it seems simple, did take some effort and, planning, where's this demonstration project going to happen? And so I think it's been sort of project based almost, the way the subcommittee has worked is looking at, going from one opportunity to the next and trying to figure out, what might be important for the community. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just make sure the button is green.
Yeah, Denise Lello. So I was just wondering if there's a plan to go beyond this project, like engaging the high school students. Hopefully you didn't just talk about that while I was talking to you. To work on other projects around the city that might be identified. It seems like once you get something going, it would be great to have this connection.
Yeah, I think they were, and it's totally fine. We did talk about connecting with other volunteer groups and specifically Tree Northampton because I think it aligned with their interest not only as a club but also in supporting pollinator habitat and what could be done around those areas of the tree plantings too, perhaps. But I think because the garden just got established this year and what they say about pollinator gardens is the first year they sleep, the second year they creep, third year you reap. So I think we don't want to busy them too much with so many things outside of what they've already established so they can really have a successful project, which can help them for future projects. So, yeah.
Um, any other questions related to that?
I guess I just have one more thought in terms of like if there was any connecting with like the Mass Pollinator Network, which I think gets some funding. I don't know if
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about the details of the what were, I think, so Rich was on it previously. I think, Tim Smith was also, I don't know if he's still participating. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think certainly, I mean, like Angie was soliciting, ideas from the group. So, that may be something, the committee could, take up. Great. Thank you. Okay. So next on the agenda is neighborhood electrification effort and strategy. Denise, I have you on that as an agenda item. So if you want to yeah, thank you.
So I'm doing the presentation today, but there is a whole group of Mothers Out Front volunteers who are involved in this campaign, which is actually a state level campaign called Neighborhood Electrification. So Sarah Parton is here with me today. I see Tina Cornell, who's also on Zoom. She's another one of our members, and Will Fogel is another person who's really invested in this. He's unfortunately in some remote yurt somewhere right now, so he can't be with us. But anyway, so most of you know that I work with a national organization called Mothers Out Front, which started in Massachusetts, and it organizes to create a just and sustainable future around climate. We embarked on a neighborhood electrification last year. And the idea is to address opportunities as they come up to assist Northampton and other municipalities across Massachusetts to meet their emissions reduction goals that have been adopted over the last 20 or so years. And part of this involves moving away from infrastructure around gas pipelines. So the campaign focuses on targeting streets that have been identified for gas pipeline replacement. And this is usually due to leaks. So the leaks have been a big problem. They're a problem because they are a health hazard, but also, and a dangerous hazard for explosions, but they also are a cost because the gas that gets leaked goes on our bills just like the gas that we use. So the gas system enhancement program, also known as GSEP, was designed in, I think it was implemented in 2014. And that the goal of that was to incentivize gas companies to repair pipelines so we didn't have these leaks that were costing taxpayers or ratepayers and were hazardous. So it turns out, though, that this has become kind of a boondoggle for investor-owned utilities because they make a lot of their money on the profits from building new infrastructure. And that includes pipeline replacement. So that's become one of the most profitable activities for investor-owned utilities. What we would like to do is alter those equations and reduce the incentives for pipeline replacement and increase incentives for electrifying streets where it's appropriate. So Gabi has this PowerPoint that is up, and hopefully you all can see that now.
How to make it bigger.
I think you need to make
All right.
the screen, because if you want to give me the keyboard, I can see if I can make.
All right. So this slide summarizes basically what I just said. There's a map there, and an organization, a nonprofit called HEAT, H-E-E-T, has put together maps of all the leaks that have been identified by investor-owned utilities across Massachusetts. And the red dots that you can see, which are quite dense, are the top hazard level or level 3. And then the green and yellow ones are less hazardous, but nevertheless, they are leaks. So gas utilities are spending over $40 billion over 30 years or so to replace pipelines that will soon be obsolete. All right, so as we electrify, and we've all made these commitments to electrify, these new pipelines are going to be stranded assets. They're not going to be something that we need. And so we are going to be paying for these pipelines, though, long after they should have been retired according to our goals for electrification. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, and so this slide, if you want to hit return, Gabi, you can kind of see. So this is just a schematic of streets that are on a gas pipeline. So those lines underneath the houses are supposed to be the gas pipelines, and then the little connection from that gas pipeline. So you can see that one house is now electrified and is off. Now we can hit the return again. And then you see that another house, willy-nilly, has just decided, oh, I'm going to go electric. And then if you hit it again, you can see that gradually and again, you can see gradually a lot of the houses are leaving the gas system. So what that means is they're not going to be customers, and they're not going to be paying for these pipelines that are being replaced. So the cost of the replacement of a pipeline in that street is not going to be paid by 6 customers. It's going to be paid by 3 or 2. All right. And so that's an equity issue, especially because the people who can best afford to electrify their houses are people who have more money, right? Okay, so we can go to the next slide. So demand for electricity is rising. We need investments in the grid. We have this weird bifurcation of utilities in Massachusetts where in our area, for example, Eversource provides gas, National Grid provides electricity, or we're lucky now because we have our own community choice aggregation. But in Eastern Mass, it's reversed. In Eastern Mass, National Grid provides gas and Eversource provides electricity. So you would think that somebody could come up with a way, because the gas companies don't want to just lose all their customers. That's not a very good business model. But somehow some larger entity ought to be able to figure this out and move us into the carbon-free future that we need. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So one strategy, and this is neighborhood electrification, is to reduce gas infrastructure as the customer base shrinks. So we could go neighborhood by neighborhood, get everyone switched to electricity retire the gas pipelines that serve that neighborhood, and we could develop some kind of utility scale financing, which we're already using for pipeline replacement, right? And that could be the electrification could be repaid in monthly utility bills. Now, obviously, some planning has to go into this because you can't just take off a segment of pipeline in the middle, because that means upstream people also are going to have to electrify, right? So one strategy is to say, all right, if you're going to talk about replacing a pipeline, let's find streets that like go nowhere. Like we have, and I'll show you in a minute, streets that back up onto Barrett Street Marsh or the bike path or into the meadows. And those pipelines aren't going anywhere after that street. So we could start paring back appropriate places. And in some cases, it might even be possible to switch to network geothermal using the gas line pipelines. But there are a lot of variables involved in that. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so the question is, who will pay for neighborhood electrification? You can go to the next slide. So gas supply, electricity prices are driven by gas prices because right now we're using a lot of gas to generate our electricity. Gas prices are volatile, so we can't predict from one year to the next how expensive it's going to be. An analysis done by the Acadia Center found that states with high gas usage also have high electricity bills. All right, and that is a trend in the Northeast region. So what we really need to do is get on to other renewable sources that generate electricity and gas. Okay, you can go, or electricity. All right, so this slide I stole from Newton. Now they had a plan to ask, in their case, National Grid, to instead of replacing a pipeline on a segment of Garland Road, to actually electrify the houses on that street. And they did an analysis, and they showed that the actual cost of electrifying every house on that street costed out using a variety of sources of how much heat pumps would cost, how much induction stoves would cost, how much rewiring for the home would be required. It would be 41% less money to electrify the homes than to replace that segment of pipeline. And the other two bars on that left section on capital costs show that if you took that length of pipeline and did an average street that maybe needed a little more infrastructure upgrade in the home, or hadn't done any heat pump electrification or anything, that would be a little more. And the worst case is still less than replacing the pipeline. Okay, so the next two sections of this deal with the 25-year carbon costs, and of course they're way lower if you electrify, and then the annual operating costs, and they're kind of neck and neck. Now, again, those annual operating costs are pretty hard to predict because we don't know what's going to happen to gas prices, we don't know what's going to happen to electrification prices, so that's kind of not uncertain. Okay, go ahead to the next slide. Thank you. So this is really hard to see, but this is one page of the Eversource GSEP plan for Northampton for 2026. And so you can see there's a street listed there. It's Olive Street. Olive Street, the reason they say they have to replace this pipeline, which is 3,461 feet long, is its leak history. They want to do it this year, actually, from sometime between April and November. They estimate it'll cost about $450 per foot, per linear foot. So the total cost would be $1,557,450. They say that they've checked to see whether this is a non-viable alternative, which is what they call it when they think they could electrify the street, and they say, no, this is not appropriate for that. Non-pipeline alternative, right. So we're looking at $1.5 million. I think there are 19 buildings on Olive Street, and we don't know how many are electrified at this point. Okay, you can go to the next slide, which is just really this, but it's a little bigger, so you can see it better. Okay, and you can go to the next slide. Okay, this is another page of the GSEP plan that Eversource put out. This includes Adair Street and Hillside Street, and I put those here because it's pretty obvious that if we have 8 lots on Hillside and they want to extend a pipeline segment for 5,388 feet at a cost of $2.5 million, we could electrify everything on that street at a much lower cost, right? And the same thing with the Adair. Now, Adair does back up onto the bike trail and the Baird Street Marsh. So I can see and they're already, out of those 14 or so lots, there are already several houses on there that are electrified, that have solar, that have heat pumps, all right? Anyway, so you can go to the next slide. So the bigger picture is that across Massachusetts, we have just in the 2025 GSEP plan, $900 million, all right, closing in on $1 billion just to replace these leaky pipelines. There must be a lot of them that we could electrify and retire so that we're not paying for these stranded assets. So what do we need to help electrify at scale? We need to eliminate the legal obligation to serve gas that gas utilities now have. We need to eliminate the 100% agreement rule that all property owners on a line segment must agree to disconnect if they're going to disconnect. And there are many other things. We need to figure out the financing. We need to figure out a reasonable way to move forward. You can go to the next slide. But right now, we could start focusing, and Mothers Out Front chapter is very willing to start identifying streets like Adair, Hillside, Olive, and focusing immediately on Olive Street because that's the first one up for replacement. And going door to door, sending out surveys, asking people, telling them what's a possibility, right? We can't offer them money, of course. We can't say, oh, the utilities are going to pay for this, because that's not true at this point. But I think that NESC and the city of Northampton can help with this effort by sending letters to the DPU, who are supposed to be regulating these utilities and setting regulations, and the legislature, and advocate realistic changes to GSEP so that customers are not on the hook for these outrageous profits that the utilities are making to continue our fossil fuel dependency. And I think that the city could also support a commission that could take on this huge, a state level commission that could take on this huge planning effort, which hopefully some people have already started, at least think tanks, but really encourage this kind of thinking about how do we make this transition. So more locally, we could use access to assessors data. I know we've talked about this before. Right now, you can go through and get property by property assessors things, but it's kind of clunky. What we would like is just, and we used to have it, but the building department changed the way they record things, and so it's not a trivial thing to download this data. But if we could download that data, we would be able to see, okay, which are the houses that have an old heating system, which are on oil, which have maybe got a permit or maybe haven't for a heat pump. And so we can begin to get an idea, okay, where are the neediest parts? Where are the parts that are the dirtiest, have old furnaces that aren't as efficient, and they're going to die soon, and people are going to be in a bind because they're going to have to hurry up, and in a cold snap like this, they're going to run out and get whatever they can so they can have heat, instead of thoughtfully thinking about how to electrify their homes. Anyway, so help with mailings, help with things like that, could move this forward more quickly. Anyway, okay, that's it. Questions?
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you come up?
Go.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Denise. Sarah Partan, also with Mothers Out Front. I just wanted to add really briefly that what we're hoping to do is to use Olive Street as a demonstration project so that we would price out all the costs of electrifying Olive Street and use it as an example to say, look, this is possible. It can be a non-pipeline alternative, an NPA, because currently the gas company is saying it can't be. It's not viable as a non-pipeline alternative, and we want to show them that it is, and that's why we need to do the surveys. So,
And I should also add that Newton was not successful at electrifying Garland Road. Everyone was willing to do it, and the utility said no. And the state said you don't have standing. And so what we have to do is we have to push the state to let us do the things that are important for our own communities. So even if we got all the people to agree on Olive Street, wouldn't necessarily, but the more communities who go to the state and say, no, stop this, we want to change this, the more they'll hear it and maybe move forward.
So I had a question. You were talking about, the remaining gas customers being sort of stranded with the cost of the ever shrinking pool of remaining gas customers being stranded with the cost. And in the demonstration in the slide deck, that was on a street by street basis. Is that actually the way it's billed, or is it just sort of it's spread over the customers?
No, it's everybody.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
thank you. I also have some general remarks in our discussion, but maybe we'll handle that separately, or how do we do that?
Go ahead. Yeah.
I think these are some very interesting ideas, and they pull together a bunch of different things. One of the things that I think was interesting is that the consequence was presented of the gas leaks was presented in terms of cost and health. My impression was that a big consequence is that the unburned methane is a far more serious climate, greenhouse effect than actually the CO2 from burning the methane. So that the part that leaks out unburned has maybe 10 times the impact of the part that actually goes through your furnace. So I think that's another driver of this concern, in addition to just the cost, at least within the mission of this commission. In terms of the equity issue, one of the things that I think would be very useful to think about, I mean, this is ultimately a political process. We have all electric neighborhoods in this city. I was surprised to discover when I started campaigning door to door, we have some very near me in the sort of the Ward 6 area behind the Ryan Road School. And I almost want to say it's random which streets got gas lines and which didn't. But those are old school 1970s electric neighborhoods, which is to say they're baseboards. So that they're very expensive to heat with. I would be really interested to look at the greenhouse trade-off between a gas furnace and an electric baseboard, especially if our electricity is still coming from natural gas. So this effort is concentrated on let's get people off natural gas because the leakage is a problem and the CO2 is a problem. In terms of politically selling progress, an approach, I wonder if there's any way we could include trying to bring some of the people on legacy electric baseboard, neighborhoods along with us. I mean, these 1970s homes that are in many ways our only reservoir of market rate affordable housing in this city. Many of them, my street, we got gas lines, go 2 streets over and it's all baseboards. And people who, can afford to have switched to heat pumps, and that's exactly where we want to be going. And there are the mass save incentives for that. But I think in terms of trying to sell an effort like this, The main focus is we're switching from natural gas to electric, and to eliminate the leaks and the cost of the pipeline replacement and maybe tap that revenue source, we need to do it on a neighborhood basis. But it may sell better as a campaign if there's a side component of bringing the people on legacy electric along with us. I had one other thought that's escaping my mind at the moment, so maybe I'll turn off over the floor for the moment.
Thanks, Chris. I actually had a couple of questions about the cost, and I don't know if Denise, you can speak to that because, and I think it's highlighted in the fact that the utility, neither utility or the state, I don't know if it's DPU, approved the Newton project. But what is it in the, you mentioned early on the financial reward for the utility for putting new or replacement infrastructure in? What is that? That must be the driver that's telling them that, Olive Street or the Garland Road in Newton isn't viable. And is it merely that they keep, it's a captive audience that they're keeping, and that's more money in their pocket because they're not losing gas in the leaky lines because they've replaced them now? Or can you speak to that?
I don't know that much about the ins and outs of how this becomes so profitable for the gas companies, but the way that it works is they can put these charges on our bills very quickly. I don't even know if it has to be completely done before they do it. There are incentives in the GSUB language that help them to really profit at a large scale from new pipelines or replacement pipelines.
Okay. Yeah. So, I
And-
mean, just, sorry.
But the other thing is that since 2014, new technologies have come out that allow them to repair pipelines much less expensively than to replace them, but they earn more money by replacing. And they don't show their math. We have no idea what their thinking is and why they think this is a non-viable pipeline alternative.
Yeah.
They don't tell us.
Well, so it's interesting. I think, just jumping from where Chris left off, I think it's an and situation. Like, if there really is a path forward to, instead of investing the 1.5 million into a street for replacement, that can go into purchasing capital equipment for those residents and get them off of gas and into electric. But at the same time, also working with legacy electric neighborhoods, because there's sort of two different scenarios or situations that, in order to reach our goals, we would need to address.
Yeah, they are. And so I did a class project about 10 years ago, and we looked at the assessor's data, and we focused on those very streets that you're talking about that were, baseboard, heat, or oil burners. And
we had a few coal, I think, in there too, when that study was done.
And one of the issues is that those areas are very wet, and you have to seal a house pretty well in order to use heat pumps, at least the technology then. And it's still an issue making sure that you have enough airflow. And anyway, because they were so wet, there were a lot of questions raised about whether they could seal them without having mold issues. So, anyway, it's not an easy problem, retrofitting older homes. And, but that's one reason that those particular areas were like, whoa, we have to be really careful here. Right.
Thanks. Go ahead, Gwen.
I guess I just thinking a few things. What I just thought of in Denise's response to that was, well, I always talk about the Affordable Homes Act. And so the retrofitting, if there's any funding for that could help communities such as this for the legacy. Another thing that comes to mind is I was looking at some of the locations for Northampton, and I notice, excuse me, Perkins, Adair, and Jackson Street from Gleason to Hampshire, and I'm thinking that's Hampshire Heights. So, and I'm also thinking about like, how a big win could be in hitting the higher density places and then also the lower income. But then again, like you said, there needs to be good ventilation, and so how that could become a challenge. At the same time, I could understand wanting to maybe amend or somehow update or inspire the state to want to update the what is it? The reward system that you were talking about that's been in place with the GSEP. So, very complicated issue, and I thank you for delving into these things. I definitely wish that we could get access to like more information about where this money comes from, what it's there for, that gets paid to keep the gas lines going, like something really detailed. It does seem like a lot of the costs for change have been falling on customers in terms of service fees and delivery charges and things like that that we see coming up in our bills, and they're indiscriminate. So what's happening is, somebody who's on a fixed income, they're going to look at the same rates of delivery, that someone in Newton might live in Newton or Wellesley is paying. That same expenses is hitting fuel assistance customers as well. And then the other thing that I have thought about is how we can make fuel assistance work with like some of the electric vendors, some of the solar vendors and things like that, and how that could ever come to be. And I don't know how relevant that is to this discussion, but I always feel like it comes to cost and like, where does the money, what is it for? Thanks.
Thanks. Think I saw, I don't know if someone had their virtual hand up online, or I don't see it anymore, but I don't,
I think that was Will Vogel. Sorry.
okay. Let me go. So Chris, did you have another comment? So any other commission member comments, and then I'll go to the public.
Yeah, I think I'd also be interested in seeing if we could sort of figure out how this requirement to replace leaky pipelines has kind of been captured by investors as a profit opportunity. And I'm guessing there are people who would understand the math on that. That may be a little interesting. If anyone has ideas on how to look into that, pursuing that. The figuring out possible neighborhoods and looking at the assessor's data, I have done some projects a little bit like that. I want to be very careful that we're taking data that is nominally public in its source form and making sure that, if we're deducing things from it, maybe we need to anonymize that or something. I mean, there are delicate lines here, even though the original data was probably public. But I would be willing to talk about, even literally some of the coding for that or something. Those are kinds of projects I find interesting, within, constraint of doing it very carefully.
Thanks. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I just want to echo what Gwen said, to thank you guys for doing this really in-depth work and presenting it to us so clearly. I really appreciate it. One thing that came to mind was, if it does seem like this is a process that is going to take a while, and some of these grassroots efforts feel like short-term possibilities for at least justifying the case scenario. You did mention that there was that disclosure that if you get 100% agreement from a street, that then there is a possibility. Like, is that a path worth pursuing for the Olive Street in particular? you know, to go house by house, find out if you can get 100% agreement. Would that be a pathway?
Well, we're hoping. But I don't, we don't have a success story yet in Massachusetts, right? And it's only been tried a couple of times. So it's, we think it's worth pursuing, and we're willing to put the time and effort into it. And it's worth both as a demonstration of how serious we are about this, but also really moving, showing that it can be done.
I think what's also important when we're encouraging folks to adopt, and we know that it's very specific based on the house location, the character of the house, how new your windows are, how well insulated it is, and heat pumps. I think we probably are all aware that they don't really function as well in super cold temperatures. So it's even more important to have the building envelope upgraded. So there are a lot of factors that are going to make it function really well for one household where it might not function as well for another household. And especially if we're advocating from a commission standpoint or from, you know, an organizational standpoint, we want to make sure that we're not providing people with promises that then in experience are going to become headaches. So I would, I don't know if there is the bandwidth through these efforts to really kind of look at, like, maybe even if it's not house by house specifics, but like if you have these sorts of circumstances, like, you know, or have you also done insulation, or, you know, what are the other steps that we can do to encourage them to have a good experience should this adoption take place?
So I wanted to note, this might segue into, so we had a conversation last time that we're going to go over later in the agenda about sort of projects that the NESC might want to take on. And I think this sounds like it fits into one of the buckets that was discussed about looking for that next area for the city to tackle beyond just city buildings, and helping the neighborhood, helping the private sector. You know, is it a solarized program? Is it new improved solarized? Is it, heat pump adoption? So we had two of those programs before. Is this sort of could this be the next generation thing? So you start collecting data or providing information to the community about what might be possible, and how do you build up the foundation so that people who might be interested in doing this do take the first steps. You know, how do you get your mass save insulation done so that you can be ready to make that transition? So it could be something that we wrap into that discussion point about sort of this piece moving into that conversation. Just an idea. Let me see, was there someone out in, not a member of the commission, who had their hand raised? I can't see, and I don't know if you can see the participants, if there's any. Okay. Okay. We don't care about that. Okay, great. Oh. Okay, so, Chris, and then maybe we can wrap up this discussion.
Yeah, I was just thinking about how I guess there hasn't been a success case of this in the state, and we might actually be a good candidate. You know, I know there was a comment about density earlier, but if the cost driver is the length of the pipeline that has to be replaced, I wonder, and this is pure speculation, you know, are we possibly looking for a semi-rural neighborhood, I want to say maybe built 1980s or later, that is so that we get slightly better envelopes, that is maybe the threshold of where it was just worth running a gas line rather than having everybody on oil tanks or whatever they were doing. But it also, you know, where the gas line has issues. I mean, I'm just thinking, you know, what might be the low hanging fruit to actually try this. You know, if people can offline tell me where to find, you know, maps of the gas network, that thing that was up earlier, the GESP or GSEP, you know, I just would be very interested in looking at some of that kind of stuff offline. So, thank you.
Great. Thanks. Any other comments? Okay, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Let's see. Okay, so I think we're gonna lose a member shortly after 5. So I think I'll put, since we need a vote on the discussion of Rex, I think I'll put that next before the Ryan Road. So, Ben, I don't know if you're up for it.
Do my best. So, um, uh, as you know, Valley Green Energy offers 3 tiers of as energy supply prices, and the standard offer is has 10% additional RECs, renewable energy credits, and there are some people who can buy up to 100% RECs. Under normal market circumstances, so first of all, these RECs are not actually renewable energy. They're credits that represent the environmental attributes in a market created by the state to push more renewable energy to be produced using like an increasing threshold that the utilities have to buy. So under normal circumstances, if we buy those RECs, we're creating a shortage, and that creates more demand for renewable energy to produce more RECs, and so you produce more renewable energy. And that's the way that you get to say, in a certain way, that you can say you're taking credit for creating new renewable energy. But that's not the market we're operating in right now. Right now, there are no RECs available because the Trump administration has basically shut down all new renewable energy development. And so what's happening is when we buy those RECs, we're just creating scarcity. But since there's no REC for the utility to buy, to replace the one that we bought, they just end up giving up and they do the alternative compliance payment, which actually raises the price of the electricity we pay, not the supply, but the delivery, the part that National Grid does. So there's a proposal amongst the communities that they're doing Valley Green Energy, their aggregation, that at least until this circumstance changes, that we should just automatically shift everyone to the basic, which is no more RECs than are required by law. It saves everybody money, and it doesn't kind of cause them to think they're doing something good when actually they're not really doing anything. And so, I mean, I could describe it further, but I basically wanted to see, does this group approve of that move going forward, rather than waiting until November, which is when we're doing our new solicitation, for new pricing, our next 2-year pricing. We could just, simply tell people, some sort of explanation of this. RECs are a bit complicated, but, a simple explanation of this in a letter, and say, now your supply price is just cheaper. You're just automatically getting shifted into the basic price.
Ben, I have a question,
Mhm.
follow-up question, and hopefully you can answer it in one short word so it doesn't stress you.
Yeah.
But has this gone to the other communities in VGE, and have they voted on it? Or are we the first one?
Well, we discussed it at the last VGE, and then we said, okay, we have to go back to our communities.
Okay.
So I don't know specifically if they've gone ahead of us yet.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. I was just curious if this was the first step, or if it had been discussed and now it's back out to the communities. That's all.
Yeah, it was discussed, and it just seemed like we needed to get get some buy-in, some level of approval for just doing that.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I have an implementation question and maybe a context tangency question. Implementation wise, if we were to sort of move everybody back to the baseline plan, can we in effect remember what they were on before? And is there any way we can put a notice in the bill that says, you've been temporarily shifted to this lower benefits, lower, virtue plan because the other is just not viable right now and you'll be shifted back? And then my sort of context question, is my impression correct that, this is the we Valley Green Energy, also the city of Northampton, that, when we do solar projects, we usually end up selling the RECs or leaving them with, the company that we're leasing panels from or something.
Right. That's true.
So we are essentially, with our left hand, we are a purchaser, and with our right hand, we are a seller, but at a much smaller scale.
Right. Yeah. And it's the we is our community. The truth is, RECs have not actually been drivers of new renewables for quite a long time. It's just not the primary factor. It's either been like an extra little goodie for somebody, helps, but it's not the thing that pushes it over the top because financing was more of a challenge. Or in this case, there just aren't any. There aren't new renewables being developed right now. They're literally sitting on Doug Burgum's desk.
In terms of whether we can remember what plan someone was on and have a advisory on the bill, do you know if that's at all plausible?
I don't know, but I think that's a reasonable thing to ask, and they should be able to just keep a record of that.
Valley Green Energy doesn't bill people, it's National Grid, right? And their
It's
supplier is
not.
Valley Green, so there might be a
actually,
bottleneck there.
Well, its first point is at least this time around, first point is this energy provider that we contracted with. And then so like if you look at your National Grid bill on like page 2 or 3, whichever it is, there's your supply price, and that's coming from First Point. So First Point is the one who needs to keep track of which tier you elected to be in.
I was also just meaning National Grid might be a bottleneck in how much language we could add to the bill that the customer actually gets, but we also have other ways of communicating with the citizens.
We couldn't add anything to the National Grid bill, but what we've done is First Point on our behalf mails out letters or cards making announcements, and that's how this would be. And so I think it would be, if we are able to tell them, yeah, can you keep a record of who had elected to go up to 100% RECs, keep a record of that. We can, if they can do that, then they could put that into the letter as well.
I don't know if I could float a really wild idea, but is there a way that we could these are different plans people are on. Could we create a new plan that is temporary rollback is its name or something?
No.
That it would be the same as the basic plan, but it would have a different name.
Probably not, just because the energy contracts have just been created. And so it's easy, it's seamless to shift people up and down between plans with their fixed names. I think it would be quite difficult to create a new.
Understood.
I have a question. Well, first, I'm very glad that someone's paying attention to this and appreciative that this has come up, because we certainly don't want to create problems in the marketplace and for ratepayers overall. So on a whole, I'm very supportive of getting this information to consumers so that they can make a decision. I guess I had two thoughts. One, because this is the operative word is choice and community choice, but yet we're like, you don't have a choice. We're just going to do this thing because it's better for you. Trust us. I just don't know how well that's going to go over. And And also because there's been so much distrust in this alternative supplier marketplace where people, I mean, there's been class action suits and, you know, all those things. Like, how can we make sure that people don't read this message too quickly and assume that First Point is, you know, we don't want to undermine First Point and then lose customers overall. I think you explained it really well. I'm just saying that sometimes we have our biases and then we interpret what we read to confirm our biases. So I would just say that we'd probably have to be really careful in how we describe this scenario. But maybe rather than doing some sort of automatic thing, this is a like, not only do we get a notice from First Point, but maybe our customers in our community need to also get a letter from us to validate, like, no, this is an actual letter. This is not a scam. This is what's really happening. Maybe there's 2 points of contact.
Right.
And then maybe the community members just get to make that choice and they have to take that step to move to the basic tier.
Well, the challenge with that, so first of all, like with the way the community choice aggregation works is it's an opt-out, not an opt-in thing, right? So automatically, if you don't do anything, you're automatically in the standard that which has this extra 10% Rex. So really, like most people didn't bother to go shift up and down. You have to go to the website, you have to go do a thing. So most people didn't do anything. So if you want actually to just solve the problem, it probably makes sense to just automatically do things automatically. I think it does make sense to explain it, you know, and with a letter that comes from the city and not from First Point or from, you know, it's all from Valley Green Energy, with the branding, etc. But yeah, if you want everybody to like, here's an issue and you can choose to opt to the basic if you want, I think you're just not going to get a lot of motion just because most people don't do anything.
I just have a clarifying. Are we talking about going back to the basic, like National Grid basic service or?
No.
Okay, I just needed to clarify.
Yeah, so it Valley Green Energy has 3 tiers: basic, standard, and 100% green or something like that. And they cost where is it? So basic is 13.5 cents, standard, which most everybody's on, is 13.9 cents, and 100% green is 16.4 cents, which is more than National Grid's basic, which is 15.3 cents. So, you know, we're saving them money and we're saving them, you know, an extra half a cent.
I think I like the idea, but I think what Angie raised, I would have a concern with too, that people who may have made the choice, whether or not they did it in an informed way, it's not for us to
Right.
judge that. And so I think I would be concerned that it might turn people off, that a decision was made that was not what you had, as opposed to creating an informed message that, and maybe you can't do that mid-year anyway, maybe it has to wait till November, but I just have reservations about unilaterally making that judgment call, given that people are opting into this thing anyway. So they've made that conscious decision to go with Valley Green Energy. That's just,
Well, but they didn't. I mean, some people did, but most people actually didn't opt. It's because it's an opt out, not an opt in.
to Valley Green Energy though.
Right.
Like,
And then when you do nothing, you're just in the standard plan.
but that was only if you were, wasn't there a split? Like some people were automatically put when it first came on. If you were in that batch, you were automatically put in, right? And then
Look,
after that, you had to opt in.
If you open up if you move to town this week and you open up your new National Grid account, you're going to automatically have VGE standard as your supplier.
I can say from experience, I moved in September from one resident in Northampton to the other, and I did not get opted in. National Grid gave me their basic service, and then after the first bill, I was like, oh, actually, I wanted the Valley Green. So just
Oh, well, that's
FYI.
not how it should be.
Yeah, and I had to, oh, this goes back to when it first started. I wasn't on that original batch, and so I had to opt in also.
Right. But did you have, so the people who are kind of like hard to reach are the ones who had an alternate supplier when
Oh,
Valley
right, yeah.
started. And
Yeah.
then we can't reach them and you can't automatically shift them. So
Correct. I think that
only the
was,
people who were on the utility basic.
yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Okay.
I guess I have a question.
Mhm.
So I think what I'm understanding is that if somebody was already using a solar company, they were not automatically moved away from that company and shifted over to Valley.
No, it's actually separate. So if you were doing community solar, then you are buying essentially credits that go onto your bill at a discount. And you can continue to do that. This is, so we've got like a supply part of our bill and a delivery part of our bill. And the delivery part is the utility. We don't get to choose about that. The supply part of that is the amount of electricity you actually use, not the solar credits generated by someone else. It's like a totally separate transaction. And in some cases, people will have selected some other competitive supplier. In some cases, they're just on the utility basic service. And at least in theory, although Angie did not demonstrate that, you should automatically, when you open an account in Northampton, your supply rate should be from Valley Green Energy.
Okay.
So if I may, or
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
so it seems like the people who already had an alternative energy supplier are kind of lost to us. They're basically unreachable unless we communicate with them in some other civic manner and get them interested in switching. So they're kind of set aside. And the people who didn't do anything and got opted in when it worked, got automatically enrolled in the cases where it worked, are on the standard tier, and they're not going to be changed. So it's really about the people who logged in and said, no, I want the extra beneficial tier. And we're kind of in a position where we have to speculate, if we change what they're on, are they going to feel betrayed because they wanted something better and now they're not getting it? Or are they the most informed customers who actually will understand a message that's, hey, here's why we have to move you to this other thing right now? And we're kind of, I almost want to say, speculating how they're going to react. And I don't have a read on that. I would be interested, if there's, and maybe we're trying to make a decision today, but maybe even in the explanation, if we can explain the math a little bit here about the consequences of basically overbuying RECs in an undersupplied market.
Okay, so one thing is, most people didn't make an option at all, and they got on standard. And standard has extra; they're paying more for extra 10% RECs. And I'm proposing that they get automatically moved down to basic and pay less.
I'm sorry, I thought we were talking mostly just about the people who'd specifically chosen more. So we're talking
No.
about moving the standard tier to the minimal tier, basically.
Yeah. And then there's the people who opted for 100% green. And I would argue, I don't know, but they might be deeply committed to the idea that these RECs are real.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're an accounting fiction, but like, so actually those would be the people who I'd be like, yeah, just, there aren't very many of them. And, I would be inclined to say, well, they made this option. They really, really want to do it. They actually did have to choose to go up to 100% green. But I think the majority of people are on standard because that's just what we put them in. And we can basically just save them a little bit of money.
All right, so I think we're gonna lose Louis soon. Should we call a vote? Are people ready to vote? Okay. Anybody want to make a motion?
I'm wondering if it could be stated with a little bit of precision. So maybe if Ben could actually make a
Yeah.
motion.
So let's see, the motion would be to automatically shift or to recommend to Valley Green Energy Working Group that we automatically shift all VGE standard accounts to a VGE basic account and avoid purchasing unnecessary and unhelpful recs.
I will second that.
Okay. Motion by Ben Weil, second by Chris. And I'll start a roll call. Louis,
Approve.
Gwen,
Yes.
Angie,
Yes. Does it also include messaging or we're just doing it?
Yes, no, we definitely would do
Messaging.
that.
Okay. We didn't hear that in the clarification. So I just want to make sure. Yeah. Keep that on me. Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Ben,
Yes.
and I would also support that with the messaging. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks.
Okay, so Ryan Road PV project update. Ben or Gabi, are you doing that?
So this was an item requested by Gwen. So maybe
Oh, okay.
Gwen could start by saying what she wants particularly updated.
Oh, sure. I was just hoping that we could get an update on what happened with Ryan Road, like what's happening now and what that looks like. Um, just, as a way for the public to understand, like what it looks like now that this project may not be funded, or for clarification.
Okay. I mean, I don't think that it's not funded, right? So we got approval from city council to spend a certain amount of money. And that the economics of it were certain types of modules that were going to be used, and an investment tax credit that would come up off those modules. We now need to spec different modules. They weigh different. That it's just like different characteristics of them. So they still have not found like this is the module we're using. So we don't have a new price, but we may find that what we have to do is stay within that old price, and change the design. Now, it's also possible with the new module that we are able to get an additional 10% investment tax credit back because it's domestic content. So it's possible that we end up with something quite similar to what was originally proposed. And they're still working on that. I mean, Gabi actually was up there with their engineer doing structural analysis of the roof just last week. So we're not we don't have a new price and we don't have a new design yet, but we're working on it.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. Any other comments before we move to the next item?
Just generally wondering, I mean, it sounds like you might end up in a situation where you had to shrink the project by 5% or come back to the council and there's a dilemma there or something, but you don't really have the numbers yet, so you don't really know.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Ben. So the next item is just going through the list. So last meeting was sort of did brainstorming about projects to think about for the coming year. So we've identified, we sort of wrote those down and I wanted to go through them and talk about sort of a response or ways that we might be able to incorporate that. Ben and I met and sort of went through the list and brainstormed about sort of how we might, whether or not it's appropriate, how we might address these things. So I'm just gonna, these aren't in any particular order, except for I think when they came up on the, in the discussion. So the first one is transparency regarding Valley Green Energy and clarify, the product. So we just talked a little bit about that, but I think Ben and I thought, well, we could easily have an update on the agenda periodically. It could be every month or so to sort of bring NESC along on what Valley Green Energy is up to. And I think that's pretty straightforward, pretty simple, and then it's in the minutes and so forth. Next, I think this was also brought up by Eric. There was a conversation around stormwater, stormwater evaluation, stormwater impacts, and stormwater charges. So I think in terms of NESC's purview, there could potentially be something to be involved with related to collaboration with departments or other private entities about managing on-site stormwater, depending on the site, the location, the characteristics, soil characteristics, and so forth. And that is sort of separate from the conversation, I think, that was also discussed about the utility, the stormwater utility, which is not something that is under NESC's jurisdiction. That's a completely separate function of the Department of Public Works and part of the budget, and sort of there's been a whole analysis on that. So that's not something that I think we should be looking at, but certainly, if there's a way to, again, it sort of goes to I think the pollinator garden thing and thinking about demonstrations of how people might be able to address in particularly problematic areas, increased stormwater runoff and impacts of those runoff on people's property. So I know DPW is looking at, from the city perspective, trying to use green infrastructure across the city where it makes sense, and also participate and provide assistance, presumably, to community members about that. So there could be some partnerships there. So maybe I should just run through sort of what our thoughts were on these, and then if there are any questions afterwards. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay. Then there was a discussion about what is, an update and how does NESC participate in EV chargers and the status of them, whether they're operational, functional, how do we make sure that they're consistently available, I guess. And I think Gwen also noted relative to that, I think you brought that issue up. And so we think that for that piece that, there could be, again, updates regularly from CAPA about the functionality of the system so that NESC is brought along and understands that. Particularly people who have questions in the community might target NESC members and say, hey, I have this problem with this charger. What's happening? And then you all know. And Gwen, I think you also raised a concern about community solar and low-income residents is participating in that and credits. And so I think, we probably don't have enough information about that. Something we can certainly look at from a staff level and see if we can bring that. And then this one, I think the next one was a discussion about how do we, sort of multi-part. So how do we go beyond municipal operations to sort of push transition off of fossil fuels? And we talked about, and this is where I was raising the point earlier in the discussion about electrification and neighborhood electrification. So Ben and I talked about, maybe bringing and working with the committee on understanding or thinking about what that next program could be, within the community, like the Solarize program or the heat pump, program. And it could be something like electrification or just creating another sort of push that's public, regularly sort of noticed in social media and maybe the mayor's newsletter to say, okay, we're starting this thing and we want people to understand what they can do, on their properties. So, and then there was also, a question or a concern and interest in raising and improving public PR about what this group does, what the city has done to meet the goals and sort of be more out there and publicizing, what the city has done for city buildings. And, I think we recognize that sort of a weak spot in the city because really, frankly, it comes down to capacity and being able to track all that stuff and regularly, provide that information. So it's something that we definitely can continue to talk about ways that we might be able to do that. There was, I think then the next item was about gas-powered landscaping equipment and maybe looking at what can be done to regulate that or to address that impact. And so Ben and I sort of talked about that, maybe one of the things that, or a few things that the committee could look at is, breaking it down into several different components, an educational component, including this program. I think the state is running a program, and Ben is the one who alerted me to this, a purchasing program this summer. So I think it's for public entities, municipalities, and Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, that maybe this committee could sort of work on that and sort of direct and really gin up information about that. So it basically is, I think, a setup to showcase what equipment is out there and viable for transitioning away from gas-powered equipment. Then, potentially we could look at language or city policy changes and potentially legislation, at least from the city side, sort of what are we doing in terms of the city's own equipment transition, and so that we can at least say this is, our policy for city services and this is how we're moving ahead, and potentially